Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop. And welcome back if you've looked at my channel before or subscribed. If this is your first time, welcome. I appreciate you checking out the channel. I've got 260 how-to videos on the channel and counting. And this is going to be a new project. We're going to carve a Drake bluebill. This is a Greater Scaup bluebill Drake. Together, I've actually gotten quite a few requests to do a bluebill Drake. It's a popular bird. It's a great hunting decoy, and so this will be a little bit fancier than a hunting decoy I'd throw in a sack and out in the river or lake, because it's going to have a decorative paint job. I will do a full-blown paint job on this one, and that will be for sale on my website at tomchristieart.com when I'm done with the project. I have about 20 videos over there now. They're 50 minutes long, roughly, and they'll take you step by step from beginning to end, paintbrush by paintbrush, color by color, mix by mix of how I go about painting a decoy. And the feedback has been great on those. I really appreciate those of you that have invested in those. But I am going to do a carving series on this bird for free on my YouTube channel. And hopefully that'll be helpful to those of you that don't need a full-blown painting video and just want to see how I go about carving this bird. It's going to be in kind of a preening position with a little bit of a wing out, some speculum on both sides, and looking forward to the project. So I've gone ahead and cut out the body of the bird using my patterns and the head to the proper width and the keel. And I'm not going to duplicate that on this particular video, but if you're new to carving and you haven't band-sawed out a bird, you don't know how to develop a pattern, there's 260 videos on my website here. The trick is finding what you're looking for. And if you use that little eyeglass icon on my homepage, type in whatever you're looking for, pattern development, it'll bring up the videos related to that, and that's been very helpful. I just got a question yesterday, what kind of carving tools do you use to get started in power carving? And again, if you put equipment in that search item or grinding bits, it'll pull up the videos related to that and kind of lay it out for you. So enough talking, let's get started on the project. Welcome back. Thanks for supporting my channel. Just a note before I get started on the head carving. When I cut out the body, I didn't see these in the block, but there's some flaws in the wood here. And I'm going to stop and take care of those right now because that's going to happen. You can never guarantee that it's going to be without flaws internally. So what I'm going to do is grind those out. I know these, number one, are kind of on the widest part of the decoy here on the side pocket. So rather than going ahead and carving, I'm just going to get rid of these. I'm going to grind out the dark sections and then use a little Bondo to cover that up, smooth that out, and then get back to a nice clean surface. I don't want to leave those there because when I do the finished decoy, when I do the painting, those flaws are going to be hard to deal with. They could open up later, so let's take care of them now. They actually go into the decoy, so there's some crevices there that we need to make sure don't end up in the finished decoy. I'm just going to speed through this. I'm using a little 1/4 inch burr, and I'm just going to use the edge of that to kind of ream out the bad parts and make sure that I'm going deep enough that I'll give the Bondo something to adhere to. All right, I've got some Bondo mixed up, and I'm just going to make sure I press it in so there are no air gaps. Once the Bondo sets, I'm just using a burr, a 3/4 inch cylindrical burr, to take off the rough edges, smooth that back down to the wood, and then we're all set. I wanted to take a look at the study bill and just a few things that are unique to the Greater Scaup's bill. Notice from the top, it's wider out here and gets more narrow as it goes towards the face. A nice rounded tip. The nostrils are kind of far apart, spread far apart, and there's a little ridge here that we're going to want to pay attention to as we're carving. And the notch is nice and pointed in front. So I've used the study bill to make a pattern for the top-down view of the bill. And now I'll use that to lay out the bill on my head block. And I'm going to do that top and bottom. Just so when I'm coping out the bill, I make sure and get a nice vertical cut and not undercut or overcut the lower edge of the bill. Now I want to get a measurement from the side, from the tip of the bill to where it meets the cheek here, and transfer that to my carving. Just strike a little arc. And then I like to pencil that in so I can see it a little better. Now I'm just going to use a rule and use my band cut saw lines here to transfer that across. Same thing over here. Now this head position is a little unique because the neck returns and it's real tight here. So we're gonna have to be careful when I cut out the bill. If I wasn't paying attention from the top, I could just cut into the neck. You can do that, but you're gonna end up bondoing or filling things in. So I wanna keep that in mind as I'm cutting this bill out. And then from that spot where it meets, the face meets the bill, these will angle back kind of just behind the eye here. And notice I'm putting a line, I'm not putting it down here, I'm kind of putting the head in the position that I think it's going to sit on the body and doing my vertical guideline there with that in mind. Because that cheek is going to go right through the eye, come down here. There's going to be undercut there for the formation of the neck. Right through the eye. Notice the channel doesn't go up here. The channel follows the bill direction so that the bird can see what it's eating. Okay. And then on my pattern, I've made a note to myself because I've made this bird, used this pattern before in 2018. It's a 1 5/8 inch wide crown. So I want to split that in half. get my crown dimension on there, and that'll tie into the V-notch up front, narrow up at the back. And I'll nail that down when we get the V-notch located, which is the next step. Now I'm going to get a dimension from the tip of the bill to the point of the V-notch and transfer that to my carving. And then using my study bill, it looks like the notch is about a 1/2 inch wide. So I'm going to mark that on my carving. Somewhere in that area. This is the point. And then you can see they don't return very far. About like that. And then my crown will tie right into that. It's pretty close on the sketch. Okay, a little time spent in layout work, but I highly recommend that so that you don't cut material away that you regret later. And in that tone, I want to remind myself underneath here, what's the profile of the neck going to look like down here? This is a pretty low position, so the cheeks are going to be puffed out. But there will be a return there so that there's a shadow under this area. So I'm just going to sketch that in with a little bit of material taken off here. And that'll just remind me as I'm cutting out the bill to keep this material intact, whatever I need to do. Okay, let's, oh, one more thing. The back of the head doesn't come to a razor point. It just kind of angles in like this. Nice rounded back edge. And I want to bring that up to about the back of the cheek here. Kind of keeping this line in mind. So I don't need to take much off there. Now we can do some cutting. Okay, I lied. One more thing before we start cutting. This is another key characteristic of the bill, is how far does this come back into the face. And this is fairly vertical on the study bill with a little bit of a return here, but it comes back quite a ways. So we'll keep that in mind as we're cutting things out. And we'll get a dimension on this length later to match things up. Make sure we're accurate. All right, I'm going to use my coping saw. And I'm going to cut just on the outside of the line. So as I sand things off, we're coming back to the pattern. And I'm looking underneath to make sure my coping saw blade is cutting squarely. And we're following the pattern up and down. And this is the area where I'm going to need to use a different saw here because I'm starting to cut in to the back side. Let's see if I can give you a view of that. If I keep cutting, I'm going to cut into my neck since it's a tight return here. So instead of coping that the rest of the way, I'm going to use a little hacksaw in a handle like this with the blade extended out. And I can use that to very carefully cut on down. And then I'll cut in from the side with the coping saw blade as well, because again, I'm going to run into interference here if I try to do it with a coping saw and cut off this piece. All right, I'll do the same thing with the other side, and then I'm going to grind this off because this is slow work with this coping saw, and it's going to be much quicker to just grind this angle piece off so that I can leave the neck intact. Just going to trim these back pieces off with the bandsaw. Now I'm going to use my 3/4 inch cylindrical saber-tooth burr. This is a fine burr, yellow in color, and I'm just going to use that to take off these pieces that angle from the cheek into the where the face meets the bill. Normally I would saw those off, but like I explained before, because of the neck geometry on this particular decoy, I'm going to carve these areas off. Takes a little bit more time, but pretty easy to do. I've got the one side done, and now I'll just flip around and I'll get this side done and then come back. Now I've got a little 1/8 inch diameter cylindrical ruby bit, and I'm going to use that to define the notch. I'm just taking wood out on either side and leaving the notch area raised where the crown comes into the bill there. I always like to start here because it kind of defines the length of the bill. It helps define the width of the crown, and it just gets things anchored as we continue to carve the head. Now I'm just going to pencil that in so I can see it clearly, make sure it looks symmetrical, and check my measurements, check the shape, check the width. And that looks pretty good, so we can move on to the next phase. I'm just penciling in that line through the eye, and we're going to remove wood on both sides to narrow the crown down to the proper dimension. In order to do that, I'm using this 3/4 inch saber-tooth burr, and I like this ball nose burr for this purpose because it doesn't cut a hard edge on the end there. It's just cutting a nice gentle curve where the crown and the top of the head come down and meet the cheek. So I'm going to narrow up the crown to this dimension that we penciled in, and this will help form the cheeks on both sides as well. You really have to kind of pay attention to the grain of the Tupelo. Tupelo doesn't have a tremendous amount of grain, but it still does have directional grain, and when you're using a burr, you just have to kind of keep that in mind and go carefully. If you're grinding against the grain, sometimes the burr will chatter or kind of snag. It's safe as long as you keep your hands out of the way. You can see I'm kind of forming the back of the cheek there now. I'm running this at actual speed because anytime I'm using a burr, you really want to exercise caution. And this is the actual speed that I'm grinding at. Now I'm starting to round the upper mandible and kind of blend that into the where it meets the face. And now I want to round these cheeks on either side as long as I'm here. Just working to further define the cheek there. From the front, we're going to end up with a nice kind of hourglass shape from the crown down to the cheek, back out, and then back in at the neckline. I treated myself to some new burrs from the James Company. They're a great supplier of equipment for carvers, if you haven't checked them out. They didn't pay me to say that, it's just Jim is a good guy. Now I want to use this flame shape ruby and go in and shape up underside here, the neck, under the chin, and carefully take material out there. This head is in a tucked position, so the neck return is very close to the underside of the bill there. But I want to create a little bit of a crease there in that tucked position. The cheeks tend to bulge out a little bit, and we're going to want to cast a nice soft shadow under here. So I'm going to dig that in a little bit and then round it like this down to that area. This little flame-shaped ruby gives you a lot of control. And the ruby or diamond, you can kind of use those interchangeably, or at least I do. That type of grit bit is pretty safe. They don't snag like a burr snags at times or jump. And so I like to use the rubies or the diamonds whenever I can. They just don't remove a lot of material quickly, and that's why I use the burrs to do rough shaping. Just taking that down, and I'm paying attention to the neck guideline that I penciled underneath and kind of carving down to that line. So we want a little bit of a return here to give the head some shape as it meets the breast. Kind of like that. Now we'll work on the bill. I want to pencil in this return where the bill meets the face. And I'm going to use this little 1/8 inch ruby again, cylindrical ruby, and go in and begin to define that area as it meets the bill notch above. And I'm rounding the edges of that notch so they blend in nice with the crown. So I'm just kind of following my penciled guideline and then cleaning everything up. cleaning that area up where the crown meets the bill. Now I want to pencil that in and take a look at symmetry. It's very easy to get subtle differences from side to side, so I spend time looking from the front especially, make sure everything looks like it makes sense. Now I want to go back to my pattern and get a dimension here from the tip of the bill to where the upper and lower mandible meet at the face. Get that distance, use my dividers and transfer that to the wood. Right now I'm just giving a distance guideline. Now I want to go back and just get a quick reference dimension from the underside of the bill to that point where they meet, and make sure that I have those symmetrical from side to side. That's another area that's very easy to get them off a little bit from side to side. It gives the bird kind of a cockeyed look when you look at it from the front. So we're going to take out this material, back to this point, and remove this material. Going back to the little cylindrical ruby. And where I put that X, I'm just taking material out down to match the width of the bill as it goes back into the face down here. And then cleaning up this line up to the top of the bill. Maybe see it a little better here. Just removing that material, getting down to the width of the bill as it goes back into the face, and then cleaning up this vertical that goes up to the notch. Now I want to change bits again and go with a little bullet-shaped, cone-shaped ruby bit, and I'm going to use that to round that area. So we don't want a hard shelf there, obviously. So I'm just using this rounded tip to blend in back to those guidelines. And then I can use this ruby to do some further shaping down here and make sure everything looks soft and round. Now I want to recheck the length from the tip of the bill back to the rictus, the corner of the upper and lower mandible there, and make sure that I've taken out enough wood. So I'm giving myself a mark. That looks pretty good. Same on this side. That looks pretty decent. And now I can pencil in the upper mandible shape. It kind of turns up in the corner here. And I'll do the same on this side. All right, I've got the mandible separation penciled in there according to my reference. I'm going to take my knife and just put a little downturn in the corner and then carefully score this out. And when I say carefully, this is an area that it's very easy to rip out that lower mandible with a knife with a lot of pressure. So I just go multiple times and gradually get a little deeper. And then I'm going to dig in from this side, try to get a better angle here. Kind of make a cut down from the corner, about a 1/16 of an inch deep. And then this is hard to see because of this neck in the way. Flip this around to this side. I'm just going to do the same thing underneath, go about a 1/16 deep, and then do multiple scores, gradually taking that deeper until we can remove this corner piece like that. I'll do that on this side, and then we'll do a little bit of work down here to smooth things out. I've got this little triangular shaped ruby bit, or cone shaped, and I'm going to use that to clean things up down here. When you make those knife cuts, sometimes they're not as clean as I would like them to be, so this is just a little cleanup work to blend things back in, clean off any ridges or knife lines that shouldn't be there. Just putting a little definition in that area right here where the upper and lower mandible meet. A little better view from this angle. There, I'm just cleaning up the edge of that lower mandible with the ruby. Once again, making sure my shapes are right for the shape of that upper mandible. Now I want to do just a little bit of work here to define the lower mandible as it meets the face. So again, kind of tough to see here. I'm taking a little wedge of wood out here to form kind of a V shape under the lower mandible. And you can see I've defined the lower mandible as it goes back into the face. Maybe we can see it a little better here. There's one cut, and then going in from this direction down below, taking out this little sliver and just helping define that lower mandible. And now I'll go in and clean that up. That lower mandible tends to go a little further back into the face than the upper, so we need to convey that in the carving. Now I'm just going to use that bit to clean things up. Now I want to set the eye width, and I've got my calipers set from my reference, and I'm going to use this bullet-shaped ruby bit to go in and remove wood in this eye channel area. I'm just going to kind of cut a groove to begin with, and then round in both directions, down to the cheek and up to the crown. That eye channel kind of goes right up to the bill. Just rounding that in so it looks nice and soft. The goal here is to get the width of the eyes set properly. It's very easy to get eyes that are way too narrow or bugging out. So refer to your reference materials. Pat Godden's books are absolutely great for this purpose because Pat did a lot of work in an aviary and did measurements for things like eye width and has put that into his patterns. And Pat sells individual patterns on his website at goddenart.com. Again, Pat's not paying me to say that. He's just a good friend and an 18-time world champion, and it's hard to beat his patterns for accuracy. I need to go a little deeper here. I want to keep going until I can get my calipers to slide back to the eye hole there. Oh, that's getting close. I still need a little more. And I'm rounding everything as I go. I mentioned Pat Godden's patterns. I use his pattern books all the time for this type of reference dimension, distance between eyes for various species, and it's hard to beat. Now that I have the width set properly, I can go ahead and round the crown, and I don't want to lose my center line, so I'm going to use my bullet nose 3/4 inch saber-tooth burr, or round nose 3/4 inch diameter saber-tooth burr. It's cylindrical, but I like that round end on the burr. And I'm just going to round just like this up to my center line, but I'm not going to grind away my center line and lose my pattern that I spent so much time developing. It's always amazing to me how a subtle change in that profile shape can make a huge difference in the way the bird projects. So I really pay attention to that. You can see I'm just rounding this in both directions. You can see I'm pushing the burr away from me right here, and that's a less aggressive attack than pulling the burr towards me. So I do this a lot to push the burr away, just to do a soft cut instead of an aggressive cut. That just has to do with the rotation of the equipment. All right, looking good. Now I'm going to use a 1/2 inch drum sander and about 150 grit sandpaper and just do a rough sand on the entire head at this point. And a little bit of shaping as well. I'm taking out all the tool marks and the burr marks, but also using this to shape things up and make sure I have nice soft curves. So I'll do the entire head like that with this sander and then do some hand sanding as well. Now I want to put some cheek definition here in these areas, very subtly, and particularly in this tucked head position. These cheek feathers tend to bulge a little bit. So I'm going to start with this bullet-shaped ruby bit and basically use that to follow my pencil lines and create a groove. In both locations here. And then I'm going to spend some time rounding the edges of that groove in both directions. So we don't want a deep trench here. We want a nice subtle shadow cast when it's all said and done. So I'm going to speed the video up here. This is 2x speed, just so you're aware, and I'm just using this ruby bit to round all of those areas. I want to go a little bit deeper. Then I'm going to use the 1/2" drum sander, and this works well for blending these out and making it look nice and soft, and doing a little additional shaping here. Just take some time just to get a nice soft blend there. You can see in the light a little bit of a shadow. I'm going to keep working those until I'm happy with them. Just a tip on sanding: if you have natural light, I have a window in my shop that gets afternoon and evening southern exposure, and it's great for this type of hand sanding. It just shows up every little flaw, and I realize not everybody is going to have sunlight in their shop, but if you've got it, use it. You can find flaws that you can't otherwise see. All right, well, I think that's a good place to wrap up session 1 of carving the bluebill drake, the Greater Scaup. We've got the head roughed out, and in session 2, we'll go into details on the bill, get those carved in, get the eyes installed. Until then, Tom Christie signing out. Good carving to you.